I'm older now, but I was 12 years old in 1978. Back at that time, arcades weren't really a place that kids hung out in a lot. It wasn't until Pac-Man came out, and then a lot of games followed, which brought kids into the arcades. They were generally very dark, filled with smoke, and loud. The clientele was always teenagers and adults. I was fascinated with video games from the very beginning. I still play them today, in fact. Something about being able to control what happens in the television. I've always found that so fascinating. If you know much about the history of video games, Space Invaders came out in 1978, and of course it was a huge hit. I didn't get it immediately for my Atari 2600 though. I knew the arcades had it. My mom really didn't like me going to the arcades because of the atmosphere, so whenever I went I had to sneak out of the house, or lie to her and tell her I was going to a friend's. I'd saved up a lot of quarters over the course of a couple months, just because I wanted to play some Space Invaders. When the day came for me to actually play, I was actually really excited. I told my mom I was just going to the park. I put my quarters in my pocket and headed out to the arcade. Now, as I entered the arcade, I realized I wasn't the only younger kid in there. It was actually really crowded, and mostly everyone was in their older teens. There were a few older guys, but there were one or two people around my age. It was very, very crowded, and very dark and smoky. Back then, there weren't any laws really keeping people from smoking inside. I found the Space Invaders game, and was surprised it was in the very back of the arcade. It had only been out for a couple of months, and I knew it had to be popular. However, just one man was playing it. I placed my quarter on the game to reserve my space as the next player. Now, it doesn't reserve the next game, however. The guy playing the game was probably about 17 years old. He was wearing a denim jacket and had long hair. He was kind of a burnout, I guess. He didn't really acknowledge me when I placed my quarter on the machine. He was too deep into the game. When the guy lost all of his lives, I fully expected him to either insert one of his quarters or just walk away. Instead, he reached over, grabbed my reserving quarter and put it in the machine, and began playing once again. I was surprised. It was a clear violation of arcade etiquette. At first, I stood there just unsure of what to do. He was a big 17-year-old, and I was a much smaller 12-year-old, so I really didn't want to approach him. So yeah, I just stood there for a few moments. Finally, though, I did decide to approach the guy. I tapped him on his side and said, "Excuse me, you just took my quarter." He didn't acknowledge me. He just killed a couple aliens and was quiet. I pulled on his jacket a little to get his attention. "Excuse me, sir." I began again. He swatted at me to knock me away. I came close to him and pulled his arm, which came off the joystick. His character was hit and died immediately. The guy turned to me and pushed me a little. "What the hell is wrong with you, kid?" He sneered at me. "You just got me killed." "That was my quarter," I shot back. He looked at me and suddenly smiled. "You want to play?" he asked. "Then play." He backed away from the game. I went up to the game to play and entered a quarter and began shooting the aliens. I was elated being that I was finally getting to play this game. And then I felt something. It was sharp and against my back. My attention immediately left the game. "I'll make you a deal, you little shit," the man said in my ear. "You clear the board without losing and I'll leave. You die once, and I'll sever your spinal cord, and you'll never walk again. You'll never get a boner either." I was terrified. I had never played this game before, and I was nervous as all hell, but I had to try. It wasn't like I could just call out with a knife already stuck in my back. I did the only thing I could. I tried my best to play a game I had never even touched before. It was torture, playing that game. The man was really close behind me, his body pushing me forward a bit, and the point of the blade in my back. Every time I almost got hit and killed in the game, I expected to get hit and killed in real life. With a knife in my back, I played this game. I kept waiting to lose my life and then die. I had only watched others play it before. Every shot I took, every shot that came at me, terrified me beyond belief, and I didn't know what to do. I just played and played. When the spaceship got down and destroyed my barriers, I could almost feel the knife going through me. But I did it, and I beat the board. For a moment, I still felt the knife in my back, but then it was removed. "Beat it, you little shit," the man told me, and I did. I didn't tell my parents about it. I just never went back to the arcade again. I was too scared that guy would kill me. Some people get way too obsessed with their video games. I was sort of like that back in the day, actually. I owned an arcade during the golden age. I was fortunate to keep this arcade open during and after the video game crash. When I first got into it, I honestly wasn't doing it for the money. I just loved arcades and wanted to have one of my own. Back then, you'd be surprised at the amount of money you could make from a game, though. When I first opened the arcade, I was really in heaven. I bought a lot of games, and most of them I enjoyed playing myself. And you know how an arcade works. It pretty much runs itself. I don't have to walk around and help customers and such. I could just play the games, even when the arcade was open. Of course, I had to use quarters, but hey, those quarters went back to me anyway. Sometimes when a new game came out, people would get a little too worked up about them, though. The games I can remember most were Gauntlet and Double Dragon. Hell, when Gauntlet came out, I felt the video game crash being completely over, as I had people lined up out the door waiting to play it. I tried to get another machine, but I wasn't able to. Anyway, that's enough background. This is about a kid about 17 years old, who was obsessed with a game at my arcade. And I mean really obsessed. But it wasn't something you would think he would be obsessed about. This was in 1986. This kid was obsessed with elevator action. I mean, a lot of people were obsessed with elevator action, but not as much in 1986 as they were years before. For about 2 weeks, this teen would come in with much more money than I thought he should have, and play elevator action from the time he came in, and he was often there until closing. Hell, I wasn't going to complain. The game was 3 years old and wasn't really played that much, honestly. It was more money for me. But even so, I noticed that this kid was sort of weird, too. When I would walk around the arcade, ask people how they were doing, most would take a few seconds to let me know they were having a good time, and would let me know there were no problems. He wouldn't even acknowledge me. The only time he did, he just gave me this look. His eyes were empty. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. It's like I couldn't even see a person in there. That scared the shit out of me, and after that I just left him alone. I really didn't have any problems with him though, until his pattern had continued for about 5 weeks. One day at around closing time, people left and I told most of them I hoped I would see them again. Everyone went out the door and I locked up. I went to grab the broom to sweep up before I went to empty the money from the machines. It was then that I noticed something though. Someone was still there, playing a game at the back of the store. I knew the sounds of the game very well, and could tell it was not just from the game demo. Someone was playing, and I had a pretty good idea who it was. As I walked to the back of the store, I felt my nerves grow, as I noticed it was that teenager, and he was still there playing elevator action. I decided to let him know that the arcade was now closed. I figured he was just so into the game that maybe he hadn't heard. As I walked to the back of the store, I felt my nerves grow. I walked up and told the guy from behind that the arcade was closed. He didn't acknowledge me at all, so I told him once again. I said I'm sorry if he hadn't heard the announcement, but the door was locked and he had to leave. He didn't acknowledge me again. He just kept playing elevator action. At that point, I knew I had to do anything to get his attention, so I reached out and gently tapped the guy on the shoulder. "Hey man, the arcade," I began. I was cut off as the man turned around abruptly, knocking my hand off his shoulder. He pulled a gun out of his jacket and pointed it at me. I fell back. "I have to finish my game," he told me sternly. Then he turned right back around. I was on the floor watching this guy, not knowing what to do. I was too scared to move, and all he did was stand there playing this game. He was pretty good at the game, as he played on for about half an hour on that one quarter. When he finally died, he cursed up a storm, then turned and walked away. He walked to the front door and tried to open it. "Hey man," he called back to me. "Your door is locked." Suddenly, there was no malice, no anger, nothing in his voice. It's like it was nothing more than a simple request. I slowly walked to the front of the arcade. I was scared. The whole time I was expecting him to come out from the front of the store and shoot me, or something worse. But he was just standing there. He actually shot me a kind smile and said, "Hey, did you know your door is locked?" I opened the door. He thanked me and told me he'd be back in the morning. He left and I locked up immediately. Of course, I called the cops. They had no way of finding him then, but they arrested him in the morning. He had actually come back to play the game. I had the security cameras, and his gun, which was stolen, was on him. I only saw him again in court. I don't know, the gun wasn't really what was scary. I mean, it was, but it wasn't as scary as his demeanor. I mean, seriously, his eyes were hollow, and when he played that game, he was unpleasant. But he just started acting so nice whenever he wasn't. It was so creepy, and I sold that elevator action game. I had no interest in having it in my arcade ever again. Yeah, I was bullied when I was in school. Bullied pretty badly, actually. There was this guy named Alex who was just the worst person I have ever known. I don't know why he hated me so much, but he just always wanted to fight me. Looking back, I learned that testosterone is a great equalizer, making boys into assholes. But whatever it was, this guy Alex just had it in for me. Alex wasn't just present at school either. He lived in the same neighborhood that I did. I didn't see him all the time, but he would occasionally show up at one of the parks or playgrounds, and he would normally chase me out. I tended to be very aware that he was around, and when he was, I could get away from him pretty quickly. He really was a very brutal bully. I mean, he got into a lot of fights, and he always beat up his opponents pretty badly too. I had never been in a fight with them, because I tended to be surrounded by teachers all day. One day, though, I decided to go out to the arcade, because I had a little bit of spare money. It wasn't something I was able to do often, because money didn't come around as much. I got to the arcade and went over to the change machine to grab some quarters. I went to go see what game I was wanting to play as well. However, I stopped when I noticed that at the end of the aisle, Alex was playing a game with his friend. He hadn't seen me yet, and I quickly moved away. I found a game on the second floor, and I just hoped he wouldn't find me. So there I was, playing this game. I don't even remember anymore what it was, but suddenly, I felt something grab me, and my head was thrust forward into the glass of the video game. I went dark. I mean, it's the only time in my life I went dark. There was no time, no existence, nothing. I was just gone. Then the weirdest thing happened. I don't really believe in the supernatural, so I'm going to try and assume this was just my brain panicking and creating an image to calm me down. But somehow I saw myself. I saw myself lying on the floor of the arcade. There were paramedics and they were trying to revive me. It was odd and only lasted for a few moments, and after that everything was dark once again. Next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital. I had died. For some reason, when Alex, yeah, it was Alex, hit me from behind and knocked me into the video game, I didn't pass out. I went into shock instead. It was cardiogenic shock. An air bubble got into my bloodstream from my lungs right as Alex knocked me forward and caused that shock, and my heart stopped. Fortunately, the paramedics made it in time. Alex was of course terrified. I mean, he thought he had just killed me and that he'd be going to jail for the rest of his life. I didn't really mind the idea, to be honest, but he apologized greatly when he came to visit me in the hospital. He was charged, but my parents and I asked the court to be lenient on him. Why, you might ask? He changed. He didn't just pretend to change either. He was so scared that he had killed me that he completely turned over a new leaf. I mean, he really changed. He was nice to me for the rest of the entire time I knew him. He even stood up for me when other bullies tried to hurt me. Alex was afraid. I was afraid too because I saw myself out of my body and I knew I was dead. He was afraid because he thought he caused my heart to stop, although the doctor said it was just a coincidence that the air got into my lungs at the time. But Alex refused to believe that. He was convinced he had just killed me, and it wasn't that he was scared of going to jail really. We talked a lot after that, and I told him how scared I was when I was dead. It was the worst thing ever, and somehow he felt it too. He felt, just for a few moments, what it would feel like to kill someone, and he hated that feeling. I don't know what else to tell you in this story. I've never had a similar experience, and you probably can never know how it felt, but it was so scary for both of us. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. All the copyright strikes are removed now, so we can get back to business as usual. I'm sorry I haven't been posting as much lately. I've just been really distracted with Monster Hunter Rise, I'll say. But I will get back to posting normally as soon as possible. Thanks to my friend KillerOrangeCat for letting me use the stories from his subreddit in this video. He's been helping me a lot by letting me use some of his stories lately, so be sure to check him out. I'll leave a link to his stuff in the description, and he does really good scary stories as well. They're all really unique, and most of them are original because he gets them himself personally through doing interviews and stuff, so if you guys would like to send in a story or you have a story you'd like me to read, links to all of my social media will be in the description below, including links to my Gmail, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type of story it is, if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the art used in this video, I have links to my artist friend in the description below. He makes really good stuff and he does commissions, so be sure to check him out if you like his stuff. And as always, links to the music used in the video will also be in the description in the order which it appears in. Thank you guys so much for watching, not too many updates this time, and I hope you guys have a great day.